The sound of her heels on the tiles carries through to the men and women still working in the corporate offices. As she heads towards her desk, she gives a curt nod to a few people she knows. They answer her with a nod, knowing that she is higher in rank than them. Most of them are unaware of her specific responsibilities. The CEO's personal assistant looks at her and nods. Unlike other employees, the busty redhead knows well what the blonde's function is. But each person has his own place in the company structure, and the assistant is happy with hers. A few years ago, she herself took the position of a blonde and was tired of it. The personal assistant's salary is too good to consider quitting, even if she still has some duties in the mornings when the blonde is unavailable. A slender blonde in heels is one of the general director's employees. She usually arrives at BCE Systems before 4 p.m. to get ready before starting her duties. Her office, separate from other employees, is located behind the CEO's office. Leaving her things on the table, she heads to the ladies' room. She makes sure to relieve herself, then wipes herself twice with a damp cloth. Then she goes to the mirror and applies standard makeup. When she's finished, she checks her watch and calls her boss at 4:30 p.m. sharp. Never earlier and never later. The lock on the secure door from her office to her boss's office clicks, and the door opens an inch. He waits next to it, opens it, and enters his kingdom. A short hallway leads to his office, where she finds him sitting at his desk. He doesn't acknowledge her presence, but she knows he's noticed her coming when she steps within a foot of the table in front of him. Then, looking at the clock on the wall, she waits exactly 5 minutes and kneels down. "Sir, what are your wishes, sir?" "You're learning," he comments, finally looking up. He is internally pleased as he watches her perform the routine flawlessly. "Stand up." She obediently puts one foot forward. Her arms are lowered down from her body and rises like Venus from the Aegean waves. To him, she looks like a goddess in her deep red, mid-thigh-length dress. It drapes over her body, highlighting her long legs, graceful ankles, and narrow waist. Her breasts require minimal support for her size 34. Her white high heels enhance her attractiveness, making her look taller than her height of 5 feet 4 inches. Her hair, which hung below her shoulders when she arrived, is thrown to the left side, revealing her beautiful neck and right ear. This is all at the request of her boss, who sends her text messages every morning telling her how she should dress. The CEO stands up and walks around the table to examine his most important and valuable employee. A young married mother is his newly hired employee. Listed as a project performance expert, she is a chartered accountant with a high EC and other responsibilities beyond her primary assignment. She will take on these duties after her boss finishes his business and leaves for the night, and sometimes he lingers longer. After all, she is his favorite. He spends some time discussing her work responsibilities for the evening after he leaves. He trusts only her with reports and some research. Diligently, she writes on the notepad she brought with her. Among other responsibilities, he trusts her with confidential projects. But first, "It's been a long day," he announces, standing up. "Follow me." Passing the copy and stationery room, he leads her to his private recreation and entertainment room. It is spacious with a king-size bed, dresser, closet space, and a door to his private bathroom. This is the men's room. The decor and furniture lack a feminine touch, a reminder that women come and go. She closes the office door behind her and serves him as he undresses. "How are things at home?" "Yes, sir," she replies, not adding anything unless he asks. She once made the mistake of talking nonstop in their early days. Her boss taught her not to do this. Training, as he called it, and she was subjected to this several more times over time. In those early days, when she was still having sex with her husband, he minimized the marks on her body. Since she was no longer intimate at home, he felt free to mark her as he pleased. Not on the face or anywhere they might be visible. And if he did, as happened on the left side of her neck when he got carried away, she was smart enough to hide the scar with her hair. Now he's naked. She hangs his expensive suit in the closet and collects his shoes, shirt, and underwear, placing them on the chair by the dresser. When she turns back, he pours himself a drink. He likes his mind and body to be clear when he's working out with her. The drink is a non-alcoholic one, just to wash down the pill he is taking. Does your husband suspect anything? No, sir, she replies, standing next to him. I know you decided to stop having sex with him against my orders, but I understand. You're taking a lot of risks with this. I wanted to keep your husband happy and occupied. I wanted you to focus, knowing that he takes care of your children while you devote your evenings to me and your work. She is not responding. How long has it been since you had sex? 5 weeks, sir. If your decision causes problems for me, I will make you regret it. Understood. Yes, sir, she replies. Unless you insist, in which case I will do as you command. Okay, time to earn your money. Take off your clothes. And she does it the way he likes. Thank you, sir, she says again. Thank you for everything you have done and are doing for me. Thank you. She repeats, kissing his palm, fingers, and wrist. Thank you, thank you. Overcome with emotion, tears stream down her face. Well, well, her boss tries to calm her down. Of course, I've always been there for you. It's part of our deal, and I keep my promises. And thank you for giving me a new life. You set me free. Freeing her was the last thing on his mind. If anything, he manipulated her distress to capture and use her. That he had to do good for her was something he knew he had to do to gain her trust. Now she thanked him. Do you consider your situation liberating? He asked. Yes, sir. You showed me that by submitting to you, I no longer had to cope with everyday difficulties as a woman. Your dominant role freed me from what I had been taught all my life what was expected of me. I was freed from the need to be a woman who has to have everything and do everything. Now I have more, and I have you. He straightened up, and the words of this beautiful young woman boosted his ego. Now he knows that she belongs to him. There is no longer any doubt in her mind whether she belongs to him. Only he is wrong. She belonged to him from the very beginning. If her husband had been there that first day, the look of loss and disappointment on the poor man's face would have let her boss know it. But he had learned his lesson with her predecessor, now his assistant. Her first time, the CEO brought her husband into the office to witness her humiliation. The weak husband stood by while his wife submitted for the simple offer of promotion to vice president. The CEO visited their home and had sex with her while her helpless husband watched. But while it fed his ego, the act ultimately destroyed her husband. The man was still vice president, but only in name, and the CEO learned a lesson not to involve their husbands in this. Call. Mr. Henderson, I heard a woman's voice on the phone. Yes, I replied, wondering who it could be. How can I help? The phone identified the call as an unknown caller, but I was expecting a call from my sister and answered without looking. Your wife, Lisa, works at BCE Systems, right? This is undoubtedly true. Lisa, my wife of 15 years and mother of our 2 children, worked there, the stranger said. My wife was a night analyst, lauded accountant and project efficiency expert. That is, a human calculator. This woman could do calculations in her head. Is everything okay with my wife? I asked, checking the time. Lisa should have either been on her way to BCE or in the building. After checking Google Maps, I saw her avatar almost above her company building. I think she's almost at work, I said. How can I help you? There was a short pause. You work at Aberton Electronics in the Springfield Business Park, correct? She asked. Ma'am, you certainly know a lot about my wife and I don't even know who you are. So if you don't introduce yourself, this conversation will end. Please don't hang up, she replied. You need to hear what I have to say. Speak quickly, I replied. My work day is over and I need to pick up the kids from the babysitter. The children were in an expensive safe kindergarten that was open until 7 in the evening, and now it was only 15:15, but she doesn't need to know about it. Your kids will be fine, Mr. Henderson. Can I call you Dave? No, you can't. Until you tell me who you are and what the purpose of your call is, I replied, trying to remain polite. I'm parked outside your office, Mr. Henderson. It's a white Land Rover with black wheels and a black grille. The windows are tinted. When you get out, please pull into the parking lot of the shopping center nearby and come to my car to talk. My name is Katie. I'll be out in a couple of minutes, I replied and hung up. My interest was piqued, both the possible connection to my wife and who this woman was. Closing my desk and locking my office, I walked to the elevators and out into the lobby. Exactly as Katie said, there was a tinted white Land Rover Discovery parked there as I walked to my Lexus IS300. I couldn't see what she looked like, so I decided to follow her directions. She pulled out just as I started to pull out of the parking lot, and I followed. Soon we were in the parking lot of a shopping center, where there was a prestigious parking garage next to Saks Fifth Avenue. Nordstrom's was on the other corner with its own garage. She found a spot, and I parked 5 spaces away from hers. I had one last internal debate about whether to talk to her, but curiosity won out, and I got out of the car. As I approached her Land Rover, I noticed Illinois license plates, 2 states away from Ohio, and we were at the other end, closer to Pennsylvania. She traveled a considerable distance to get to me. This made me think it was probably something important. With some trepidation, I tapped on her passenger window. Hearing the door locks unlock, I opened the door and looked inside. I was greeted by the sight of a slender brunette in jeans, boots, and a white sweater. She had medium-length, jet black hair, red lipstick on her full lips, and dark sunglasses. I estimated her age to be somewhere between 35 and 40. But with women and their ages, you never know. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Henderson," she said, waving me inside. I expected us to talk right there, but the door locks clicked and she shifted the transmission into drive. She pointed to the seat belt in the passenger seat, which I reluctantly fastened. "Where are you taking me, Katie? Is there a last name, and is it Mrs. or Miss?" "Mrs. Sanchez Weiss." "Not yet." "Your last name is familiar to me," I replied. "But you have Illinois plates." "Weiss, Weiss. Where have I heard this name before? The CEO of Lisa's company? It wasn't a common name, but I knew people with the last name Weiss in New York, Los Angeles, and even North Carolina when I worked there in the summer. It was written differently, but pronounced the same." "I see your last name is Spanish," I said. "From Texas," she answered proudly. "My family was in Texas before it became the Republic of Texas. Our ancestors fought against Santa Anna when he invaded." She was definitely proud of her heritage and family history. "And Weiss?" "Austrian," she replied, pursing her lips. "My husband, Erich, is the CEO of BCE Systems. We live in Chicago now, but we used to live here when the company was headquartered in Ohio. Well, I live in Chicago. He lives here in Ohio temporarily." At this point, I started to worry about the connection. What do my wife and I have to do with this? By this time, she had already left the parking lot and was driving further from the shopping center. "I would like an answer, please," I said in a stern tone. She took off her glasses and turned to look at me with her piercing almond-shaped brown eyes. Then she turned her attention back to the road and started talking. "I think I should tell you a little about how it all started and how it got out of control. Lisa and I met after college 16 years ago. I was 23 then, and Lisa was 22. I met her at a nightclub where she and her friends went to dance on Tuesdays and Fridays. It was Friday. I won't deny that Lisa's figure slender, with long legs, blonde hair, and a toned ass caught my attention when she was dancing with some guy. It was a fast song, and her ass was fighting for attention under that tight white short dress. Spinning on those high white heels, she attracted the greedy glances of men and the evil glances of women. Well, some women also looked at her with interest. All I was interested in was her face. When she turned around, I thought I saw the most beautiful woman on earth. Noticing me looking at her, she glanced at me briefly as she and her partner returned to their table with their friends. My eyes followed her as she thanked the guy as she pulled away and looked at me one more time before sitting down and showing me off to her friends, and they all giggled. 3 minutes later, the music started playing again, and I asked one of her friends to dance. The pretty blonde looked at me challengingly and then nodded as if she understood and waited for the other guy to ask her out. When the song ended and another began, I noticed how the blonde refused the guy who invited her to dance and looked at me with challenge. Her red-haired friend leaned over and screamed in my ear over the loud music. Her name is Lisa, and if you take me back to the table, I think she'll dance with you. Not to delay, I took the red-headed friend to the table and left with Lisa, the blonde, towards what I thought would be the dance floor. But Lisa had other ideas. Taking my hand, she pulled me towards the exit. "Where are we going?" I asked with a grin. "Where we can do unimaginable things to each other," she replied. And we did this all Saturday until the morning. Within 2 weeks, we became inseparable. 5 months later, we got engaged. Lisa wanted a wedding in Texas, where she was from. But this was not destined to come true. Her father's car dealership went bankrupt, and there was no money for a big wedding. With my parents in the process of divorcing, a big family wedding was also out of the question. Instead, we had a small wedding in San Diego and invited her mom and dad at our expense. My parents lived near Los Angeles, so they came by car with my sister Grace. After the wedding, we had a short honeymoon in Vancouver and returned to start our life together. But we didn't stay in California for long. I was offered a position at Aberton Electronics that I couldn't refuse. Before leaving San Diego, Lisa sent out a resume for an accounting position near my new job. And soon after we moved to Ohio, she got a job. I won't bore you with stories about the early years of marriage. You know, sex without kids getting in the way. The ability to go away for the weekend without worries if you had enough money. To be healthy and attractive so that people look at us. Big ego boost. To know that you are married to a 10 and you yourself are a 9. Yes, the self-confidence of youth. The sex was great. Do you know how I understood this? Lisa constantly asked him, and being a hyperactive American male, I answered the call. The best thing about our sex life was that neither of us was over the edge, but it might seem different to others. Okay, we were both exhibitors and voyeurs. We both worked on our bodies and wanted to show them off. But there was more to it than just that. We loved all kinds of sex. We laughed when people said they were making love. For Lisa and me, this was a code word for boring sex. Lisa eventually got a job at BCE Systems, and I was promoted to Aberton. Lisa's high IQ helped her get ahead and be noticed. We were invited to corporate parties at both companies, and for most of our friends, Lisa and I were a couple on the rise. At these parties, we danced with different people for a while, and then with each other. This was our usual routine. Of course, what couple aspiring to success doesn't eventually decide to have children? 5 years after their wedding, Lisa stopped taking the pills. In her second month, she became pregnant with our son, Kyle. Almost 2 years later, our daughter Amber was born. The gap between the kids wasn't that bad. We actually enjoyed carrying Kyle around in his carrier and getting smiles from people on our walks. For some reason, we didn't care that we couldn't go out like we used to. The problem was that we had no family to look after the children after Amber was born. And over time, the stress of work and 2 children began to take its toll. But we focused on what was important, on our children, at our work, on our health, and above all, on each other. By that time, we had our first house, and after the children fell asleep, we spent time together. Time for sex. I've heard other men say that their sex lives almost disappeared after having children, but ours, although not as active, has not disappeared. We laughed that sex was our hobby. We had less of it, but it was there, and both initiated it. Over time, we found a nanny who could be trusted with the kids on Friday or Saturday nights so we could go out. She was a middle-aged Polish immigrant who loved children. Her husband was a truck driver, and her children were adults and left home. So, with the kids well supervised, we started going dancing again. Life became good again. These were our happiest years. Blessed with our beautiful children, successful careers, and happy marriages, we had no idea that difficult times lay ahead. There is nothing that makes you stop and think about life more than a sick child. Little Amber was a quiet girl. She barely spoke at 2 years old. Unlike her talkative brother, Amber was a quiet child. Doctors told us that children who speak late have higher IQs. Given that her mother's IQ was 150 and mine was 146, we thought Amber was in that category too. Sure, our energetic son was smart, but his personality was different. At least that's what we thought until little Amber had her first seizure at almost 3 years old. After the initial shock, we took her to doctor after doctor. Some thought it was epilepsy. But after an MRI scan, they discovered a tumor. Lisa and I almost fell apart when we found out about this. But the surgeons told us that they could perform the operation and save her life. It will cost a fortune. Lisa handled our bills, but I didn't need her to tell me we might lose our house to pay for the treatment Amber needed. The situation seemed grim. Even with my and Lisa's salary, I thought we were facing financial ruin. Then Lisa came home and sat with me. "Honey, we need to talk," she said. Who wants to hear that, right? We had problems, but I didn't think Lisa would leave. There were no signs of this. Yes, we were both irritable, grumpy, and withdrawn at times. But who wouldn't when faced with the possible loss of a child and financial ruin? We supported each other and still did it. Or so I thought. But last week Lisa seemed to be somewhere else when we were together. It was as if her mind was busy with something. I was too busy with our problems with our daughter to think that this was something different for my wife. So I sat at the dinner table wondering if she would offer to sell the house. Do you remember when we switched from Aberdeen Health Insurance to BCE 2 years ago? Yes, your company has more benefits, so their insurance is cheaper than mine and has more benefits. But didn't you say they wouldn't cover most of the surgery anyway since it's considered experimental? Yes, she answered, looking through the insurance papers and several brochures. And my company is ready to help. They have a charity fund that will cover $20,000, and they will give us another $20,000 to pay as we go. Wow, I answered. That's a lot of money. Our daughter is worth it, she replied, still not looking at me. I know, considering that we need to hire someone to take care of Amber while we're at work. I figured that out too, she replied, finally glancing at me briefly. If we take care of her ourselves during her recovery, we can save a lot and just focus on paying off the $20,000 we'll owe my company. I was offered a promotion. I can use all the money from it to pay off the debt faster, and this is on the second shift. So one of us will always be with the children. Second shift? I asked. When will we see each other? She shook her head with a sad expression on her face. Do you think I want this, Dave? She asked, with a tear on her face. We've been backed into a corner. I know, I replied, feeling like a jerk for questioning her resolve to do more for us. We both knew that I had asked my company to move me to a position with a higher salary, but this would require frequent travel, leaving Lisa to manage both children and her job alone. And one of the children would be bedridden, requiring 24-hour care. I felt so useless. Listen, Dave, she said, taking my hand. We didn't ask for this. It's no one's fault. It's fate. Amber is sick, but thank God we can save her. The doctors can. All we need to do is do our part for our children and our family. Please don't make me make a scene about this position, please. What could I say? I already felt worthless. I nodded in reluctant agreement because I knew we needed to do this, just like Lisa said. Lisa was 33 and I was 34 when our lives turned upside down. Amber had surgery shortly after Lisa was promoted and moved to second shift. Aberdeen gave me 2 weeks off during and after the operation, but BCE could only give Lisa 2 days for surgery. Why can't they give you more time? You could probably take a vacation, I suggested. But Lisa shook her head, turning away. They created this job for me. I can't afford to lose it, Dave. We'll have to cope. We'll have to cope. This became our motto in the coming days, weeks, and months. Our son was in kindergarten most of the time. When he came home, he was too young to understand all the fuss we were making about his sister. It soon became another problem on our list. I was left to take care of him since I was home at night and Lisa was at work. Somehow, I managed to spend as much time as possible with him, while constantly caring for my daughter. Lisa and I rarely saw each other. On weekends, when we had some time to be together as a family, we spent it with the children and doing household chores. The only time left for sex was Saturday or Sunday, if at all. But with all the stress and anxiety, our sex life became strained and empty. Our sex life was becoming a shadow of its former self. At first, the surgery seemed to go well. But no, another operation was needed. Another 40,000 was needed to cover the cost. The doctors told us that everything would work out, but they had said this before. However, what could we do? Lisa was able to borrow money from her company again. I didn't understand how this was possible, but I was glad that we had the opportunity to pay for the operation. Now, looking back, I understand that then everything went wrong between Lisa and me. She became withdrawn and quiet. When I tried to ask her what was wrong, she lost her temper. "What's wrong?" she screamed. "Look around, Dave. Our daughter could die if we don't operate on her. The bills will keep coming, and it all seems to be on my shoulders." "You're not alone," I said in protest. "I'm doing the best I can, taking care of the kids while you work and working during the day. I know it's not easy for you, but you're not the only one who's stressed about all of this." But Lisa looked at me with a cold look that I will never forget. She didn't need to talk. In her eyes, no matter what I did, it was not enough. The woman who thought of me as the whole universe less than a year ago now looked at me as if I were empty. Lisa started working longer hours at BCE while I stayed with the kids at night after work. She used to come home by 11:30. Soon she began to return at 1 in the morning and sometimes at 2. On some Fridays, it was closer to 3 in the morning. "I just have a lot of work to do," she replied. "I asked for more responsibilities for a promotion. You just have to cope, David." When did I stop being Dave and become David? I asked myself. In the past, she only called me David during rare fights. Now I was David all the time. We rarely saw each other, and when we saw each other, there was no intimacy. As for what could be called sex, it had only happened once in the last 7 months, and it was terrible, as if sex with me was another responsibility. No matter how bad our connection was, we shared the goal of keeping our family together and taking care of our children. Looking back, we couldn't have done it if we hadn't both worked and done our part. The problem was that our paths almost never crossed. When we did our taxes that year, I finally saw that Lisa was making more than twice as much as I was. I asked myself how this was possible, but then she pointed out that she basically does 2 jobs in 10 to 11 hours a day and uses the extra income to pay off debt to her company. Weeks turned into months until Amber began to show improvement. A year after her first surgery, she began walking and talking with her brother again. It seemed that only he understood her babble. Doctors told us it was a combination of speech problems and damage caused by surgery and tumor. The good news was that with speech therapy, she would be able to function. The tumor and surgery did not affect her intelligence, which was obvious from her activities. She spent hours drawing and playing board games by herself when Kyle was too busy with school and friends. Once again, we were lucky that the tumor was benign and not cancerous. Talking about Amber and Kyle, their lives, or our house, was the only thing that connected Lisa and me in those days. I couldn't remember the last time we were in bed together. All my attempts to start something were always met with refusal. Our good sex life became a victim of our efforts to save our daughter and family. Our house was turning into just a building. Even on weekends, I took the children somewhere while Lisa either slept or went to work. We became simply housemates who shared shelter and 2 children. One Saturday afternoon, while taking the kids shopping, I decided to drive past BCE Systems. Of course, my wife's car was there. I just drove by, wondering if it would ever end. Or one day, she will simply file for divorce. "Hey, Dave, did you hear that?" One of my colleagues exclaimed joyfully one morning when I arrived at work. He barely had time to put the laptop case on the table before Jeff continued. "What are you talking about?" I asked, walking past him. I was tired and didn't sleep well. Having not had sex for almost 5 years, I was not in the best mood. These days, I am rarely in a good mood. "Boy, we won the lottery. 100 million in this drawing and only 10 of us in the pool." I froze, looking at him with my mouth open. "Dave," he patted my face with his hand. "We win. You and Lisa will be able to pay all your medical bills. Isn't that great?" I almost collapsed from shock, but somehow he managed to sit up before he started crying at our lucky event. Closing the door, I cleaned myself up before some lucky co-holders of the winning ticket came into my room to celebrate. Randy and Sheila. I'm glad Randy came into the room with her because she has been the source of many a man's fantasies over the last 3 years since she came to work at Aberton. There was nothing particularly magnificent about Sheila, but her whole image and manner of moving. Oh God, I needed sex so bad. "Dave," she says, sitting on the edge of my table. Her tight ass teased my endurance, and she won. "You guys," my boss poked his head in my door. "I know you won't be working today, so take the day off and please come back tomorrow." "What are you going to do with your share, boss?" asks Randy. Sheila is still looking at me, wiggling her butt provocatively and twirling her finger through her medium-length brown hair. "My wife has probably already spent it all," he says and leaves. "What are you going to do today, Dave?" Sheila asks, still twirling her hair with her finger. International female signal, "I want you." Randy took the hint and left the room. "I'm going home to talk to my family," I replied. "Dave," she says, leaning over, "everyone knows that your wife is ignoring you. Now you have money to move on. When you decide, give me the first chance, okay?" This isn't the first time Sheila has offered herself to me. I had never touched her, but that day I wanted to do it so badly. "I'm still married, Sheila," I replied. "And it's not that you're not attractive or anything, but I don't want to risk getting caught cheating. Even if I get divorced, Lisa will get half, and I don't want to give her the chance to get more than half. All I'm saying," she leaned in now and whispered, "I'm waiting for you, Dave. I think you're worth it, and all my share is mine to share. And I would share everything with you, everything you see and you can imagine. You're worth it. It's a pity that your wife doesn't see it." "What she does and doesn't do is between Lisa and me," I replied, standing up. "I know you want me, Dave," she replied, "and I'm ready for you. Not for one night, but for more. Think about it." I swallowed and somehow walked past her. She didn't respect the HR rules about harassment. At that moment, with that amount of money, Sheila was not worried. I drove home with a huge smile on my face. I woke up a debtor and became a millionaire. Okay, 10 million isn't that much, and it will be barely 6 after the state and feds take their share of the taxes, which they always do. But still, anything more than 5 million is not a small thing. When I arrived home, both children were at school. Amber was healthy and growing into a beautiful young lady. Kyle still got naughty sometimes, but no more than most boys his age. With Lisa's car in the driveway, I knew she was asleep. She came late again. I waited until 1 a.m. and fell asleep on the sofa. She was in our bed when I left in the morning to take the kids to school. Lisa was in the shower when I entered the house. I heard the water flowing and went upstairs. "Hi," I called out to let her know I was home. "I'm in the shower," she shouted back. "Are you almost finished?" I asked. "I have news you'll want to hear." "Give me a few minutes," she replied. "Will you make us some coffee?" "I'm already cooking," I answered and sat on our bed, waiting. Through the bathroom door, I saw her naked behind the frosted glass. I watched, fascinated, since I had not seen my wife naked for more than 3 years. Didn't touch her more than 4 times. We didn't have sex with. I can't remember if it was before or right after Amber's surgery. A sad summary of the last 5 years of our lives. The years that should have been happy after our daughter's recovery. My mind came back as I fantasized about her body in my arms as she turned off the water. She started to open the shower door. Seeing me looking, she stopped and reached for a robe hanging nearby. After putting it on in the shower, she stepped out and wrapped a towel around her hair. Neither of us said a word. Silently, I watched her brush her teeth and get herself in order. She knew I was watching and seemed annoyed. I wondered what was on her mind. Usually, I'm at work at this time, and she's alone at home. With intimacy no longer a part of our lives, I imagined she was uncomfortable with my presence in such a vulnerable situation. "Don't worry," I said. "I won't pester you if that's what you're thinking." "I know," she replied. Surprisingly, this comment really hurt me. I should be proud that my wife considers my character to be so moral that I will not force her to have sex. But at the same time, I was annoyed that she thought I was harmless. I was also annoyed that she was standing there in her robe, waiting for me to leave so she could get dressed. But I looked at her defiantly, daring. But she's smart and diffuses the situation. "Let's have some coffee, and you can tell me your news," she said, pulling her robe closer to her body. In the kitchen, she poured herself a cup and sat down at the table. "There was a time, Lisa, when we poured each other a cup of tea, smiled at each other, and—" "A lot has changed since then," she said in a distant voice. "I wouldn't know, Lisa," I replied. "You live your life. You don't spend time with me even on weekends. Not to mention there is no intimacy and, frankly, no love. What happened to you, Lisa? Our daughter got sick, that's what happened. Did you miss this moment in our lives?" She answered sharply. "I had to work hard to pay off the loans, if you only knew." "I know that you have moved away from me, Lisa, as if it was my fault that Amber got sick and that we didn't have money for the operation. I appreciate what you do for us, but why are you moving away from us? Even on weekends? Why?" "I told you, I work hard. I work 2 jobs, 10 to 11 hours a day. It's tiring, and sometimes I have to go out on Saturday to catch up. Why can't you understand?" We looked at each other for several long seconds that felt like minutes. I couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding something from me. "Well," I replied, breaking the silence, "you won't have to do this anymore." "What do you mean? My work is important to us. We need money and health insurance." "We won the lottery," I said to stop her flow of words. "What?" she asked incredulously. "You heard correctly. Our office pool won the lottery. After paying taxes, we will have more than 6 million left. We can pay off all our loans and credit cards and have a lot of money left over." I smiled as I said this, hoping she would be happy. In my delusion, I imagined how she would rush to me, sit on my lap, and joyfully kiss me. That she will say that she will stop working so much and at night if she does not quit her job at all. Instead, I was met with the look of horror or a cornered animal. Lisa quickly pushed the cup away and stood up. "I can't quit my job," she replied. "I have an obligation to do the work I said I would do." "What?" I said, stunned by her reaction. "Why, Lisa? Our only obligation is to repay the loans. We can do this as soon as the money arrives in our account in a couple of days." She shook her head, wiped her eyes, and ran up the steps. I followed her, but she locked the door in my face. In hindsight, I should have kicked the door off its hinges and rushed inside, grab her by the shoulders, and then, what, dishonor her? This only happens in old movies, and not very often. Nowadays, this is considered an attack. When the police are called, they have to arrest someone for a violation, and this someone is usually a husband. I may not have been the courageous hero from the stories and old movies, but I was smart enough to stay out of jail so she could get custody of the kids. I sat down at the kitchen table, seething with anger at her. This should have been a happy time for us. Instead, my wife was practically terrified that we could pay off our debts, so she wouldn't have to work so many nights and long hours. An hour later, she came down the steps, dressed for the gym, and carrying a business suit on a hanger covered in plastic. She tried not to look at me as she walked out the door. "Not so fast," I said, blocking her path. She recoiled, but stood her ground. "It is quite obvious that your staying at night work is not only due to the need for money. I could ask you what's wrong, but you'll come up with some nonsense to brush me off at this point, so I'll make it easier for you." "What do you mean?" she asked. "I will file for legal separation. We can both stay here. We hardly see each other anyway. If you don't do anything for 3 months, it will turn into a divorce process, and this farce called marriage will end. Since you are never home, I will seek custody of the children and a home for them. We can find you an apartment, probably closer to your work so you can do more of what you do there." She glared at me with her arms crossed until I mentioned the apartment and whatever it is you're doing there. This made her wince, but I was too angry with her to understand it and its possible consequences. "I don't want a divorce," she said. "Well, I didn't want what our marriage turned into. But that's what I got. I'll talk to a lawyer so we can divide our assets and pay your company. You will need to know your loan payment balance from BCE soon. If you don't do this, I'm sure the lawyers will file a request to get this information from your work. They won't like it, so I suggest you go to HR and request a pay statement. If I pay off my loans, will you stop this separation or divorce?" "We need to pay off the loan no matter what we do with our marriage," I replied. "So let's get this out of the way first. Bring me the transcript so I can give it to my lawyers." "I'll ask, but I can't promise that they will." "What organization that has an outstanding loan doesn't want its money back, Lisa?" "Okay," she replied. She said it the way wives tell their husbands when they are being forced to agree to something they would rather not do. This translates to, "I hate you." All married people know what I'm talking about. With that, I stepped aside and let her go. After she left, I called a friend who had gone through a terrible divorce and asked for his lawyer's contact information. I was surprised that he accepted me the same day. Between the call and the meeting, I moved my things into the guest room. The lawyer agreed that separation was better than divorce at this stage. When and if we crossed that line, he wanted me to follow the rules and avoid arguments that she could record and use against me. Again, not seeing each other much helped, but I had to be careful. The money was deposited into the account I requested under the supervision of my lawyer. On the second day after our conversation, Lisa provided a statement of payments from BCE Systems. It was delivered by a courier from her legal representative. Considering how much money we now had, the remaining $5,000 debt seemed insignificant. She should have understood that we were free of this debt and could breathe easier financially. However, she reacted with horror that she would have to leave her job. Then I did the calculations that I should have done from the beginning. We needed $80,000 just for the surgery. The amount increased to $100,000 due to other unforeseen expenses. The BCE Charitable Foundation covered $20,000 of this amount, leaving us with $80,000 to pay. The total loan at 5% APRA should have cost us $103 over 5 years. Lisa earned $120,000 a year. This is $60,000 more than she earned before the operation. That means she earned $600,000 over the past 5 years, which is more than enough to pay off her loan. Where did all the extra money she made go? After reviewing our tax returns, I didn't notice any irregularities, but I was no expert. It seemed to me that she received a lot of money and only half of it went into our bank account. I took this to my lawyer, who contacted the accountant, who confirmed the discrepancy. My lawyer called her lawyer, and this was a real blow for Lisa. Who was this woman I married? What has it become and why? Yes, we had financial problems and we were faced with the possible death of our child. But why was that? Why did she practically pull away from me? And why did she hide the money? She had enough money to pay off all her debts. And so what? I asked myself. Realizing that my wife had consciously chosen a different path in life, I had to come to terms with it. We were no longer a team of two, no longer the couple I thought we were and could one day become. It hurts, but as long as I have kids and we're not separated, I'm at peace with this new phase of our lives. My children need me if their mother is no longer there. Since she worked while the children were home, I was their only parent. Having made this decision, I allowed myself to buy a new car, a Lexus is, and Lisa bought some kind of Mercedes SUV. I knew he was black, but I hadn't seen him much since I was back at work. The money we received from the lottery was not enough to retire, and then we had two smart kids who wanted to go to expensive colleges, so I continued to work at Aberton. Lisa's lawyers refused to reveal where the money she hid was located. It seemed that as soon as the taxes were paid, they disappeared. I was too trusting to let her manage our finances. But then I loved her and trusted her. I loved it. Admitting that I no longer loved my wife was the final nail in the coffin for me. But it was true. Years of detachment, even while living in the same house. What started out as an attempt to save our daughter and stay afloat turned our marriage into this fiction of distance and almost no communication. Our outstanding debts, including the mortgage, were paid off before the property was divided 50/50ths. The part that Lisa did not hide. It was all handled by an accounting firm that the lawyers agreed to. Until 3 months had passed, we officially separated, but lived in the same house with the children. Following legal advice, I did not ask Lisa why she hid all this money that could have paid off our debts. I thought she and her lawyer would come up with some nonsense to explain away her shenanigans. In my mind, winning the lottery was a gift from above, and I was happy that I was leaving this marriage without bankruptcy. Child custody became a critical issue. Lisa refused to discuss the divorce, but made it clear that she would fight for the children. And that was a problem because we had no evidence that she was doing anything that would put the children in danger. My lawyer told me that I could date women as long as I did not introduce my children to my companions during the separation. Even though I knew I was legally allowed to, I had problems having sex while I was still married. Not only moral, but also practical. I was worried that Lisa would find out and tell the children to turn them against me. In addition, Lisa still refused to consider the possibility of divorce. I had no evidence that Lisa cheated on me, so if I date a woman and the kids find out, I'll be that bad person, confirmed cheater. So I decided to wait until the divorce. Sheila was not happy about this, but I didn't see any other way out. My children and their respect were more important to me than her. Eventually, she understood. We sometimes had dinner together, but in different cars because I assumed that I was being followed. Paranoia, you say? Not at all. Private detectives are expensive, and with her lottery win, Lisa had a lot of money to spend on spying on me. Not out of love or jealousy, I assumed, and so that she has evidence against me for a possible divorce. In Ohio, adultery can only be used in court proceedings regarding the division of marital property, and now we both had a lot of it. Since I now also had money, I hired a private detective to follow my wife. 2 weeks later, the detective reported that she only went to stores, visited children at school, and worked. They could investigate her activities at BCE, but that would require planting one of their people there to monitor her. It would take another month and more money. I've been mulling it over, but have moved forward with the issue of DNA testing for children. Fortunately, both children were mine. And then Katie Sanchez Wise showed up. She parked her Land Rover in the parking lot of a fancy restaurant, and we went inside. Reservation for two. The name is Miss Kathy Sanchez Wise, she told the head waiter. We were taken to a private room with one table. I never knew it was possible, but then the restaurant was frequented by people of means. It still hadn't dawned on me that I was now one of those people. We sat down, and she took the menu. It was dinner time, but my appetite was gone. Order something. It's at my expense, said Katie, still reading. What you've told me so far has made my stomach twist in knots. I know the feeling, she replied. When I found out, I was horrified. I never expected my husband to stoop to this level. He didn't do it alone, I replied. David, I think. I prefer to be called Dave, I replied. She called me David when she was angry with me, and what she's been doing for the last 4 years or more. Katie put the menu down and exhaled empathetically as she looked at me. Unfortunately, this was a sign for the waiter to come over and ask about our selections. I ordered soup and she ordered pasta. I don't remember which one because I barely touched mine. What I needed was a strong drink, but I wanted my mind to be clear at this point. So, let me get this right, I said once we were alone. Your husband and my wife have been having an affair since the beginning of my daughter's first surgery. It wasn't an ordinary romance at first, she replied, looking thoughtfully to the side and then looking straight at me. This requires an explanation. I'm sure so, I replied with a frown on my face. But most novels have similar aspects, including both parties agreeing to them. She tilted her head before speaking. One of those gestures that says there's more to it than this. Erich, my future ex-husband, is mostly responsible for this. And no, he didn't persuade her the way most seducers do. It was more insidious. But she agreed to it, didn't she? I asked. Yes, I agreed, Katie admitted. Look, it will work better if I just tell you what happened and you don't interrupt. I know this is a little shocking and will get worse as the story goes on, but you need to let me tell you everything. Before you start, I have one question to ask. Katie was a little annoyed, but waved her hand at me to ask it. This woman was accustomed to power and having her wishes fulfilled. I could tell it. I made a mental note to Google it as soon as I got the chance. How confident are you that your information is correct? I spent over $50,000 this year alone on getting information, and $70,000 every year for the last 6 years. Do you hear me? L. Why are you doing this to me? Lisa sobbed. E. Because I can. Because what good is power and opportunity if you don't use it? Men and women have used their power for centuries to remind people like you where you belong. You stupid, spoiled girl, he said contemptuously. Women like you think they control the world around them. You may have power over your husband, but in my world, you are just one of my subordinates. I have the money to save your daughter. Or not. Accept this as your reality. No one will save you from your situation. L. Oh my God. E. I don't see your deity around to help you, do I? Oh wait, I was sent here to give you a chance to save your daughter. Yes, Lisa, maybe your God sent me. I'm here and you have a choice. Do what I ask and your daughter will live. Resist me and you will be at her funeral knowing that you had a chance to save her. Even if you sell your home and use your savings, you won't have enough money to pay off the debts from the surgery. And there is one more thing. The doctor who will perform this operation is unique. He does not share his methods with others. I have enough money to make him refuse the operation. Do you understand this? L. Please, don't, my wife begged. E. Or what? He said contemptuously. Are you going to be mad at me and sulk? It will be my pleasure to wipe that look off your face slowly. L. I don't want to have sex with you. Why do you want a woman who doesn't want you? Erich laughed at her words. E. I want you not to want me at first. Watching you change will be so delicious. And most importantly, I like that you are married. I want you to stay married. Having sex with a married man's wife is so much fun, Lisa. Next time I see David, I'll tell him what a good worker you are. How good you are at your job. In time you will come to terms with this, Lisa, my dear. I'm fit, handsome, and well-equipped. I guarantee you will enjoy our time together. So, what's your answer? I've spent enough time talking. What is your decision? Lisa cried again and begged again. L. Please. No need. E. I'm done with you, Erich said. The security is at the door. They are escorting you out of the area. L. No, please. I will do it. E. Will you do what? L. I will do what you asked. E. And what exactly? L. I will have sex with you. E. Oh, that sounds so impersonal. But yes, you will do this and even more, he answered coldly. You will be mine so that I can call you from the next office at my discretion. During breaks, you will do the work that I assign to you. And you must do it well. Time spent serving me will not be an excuse for not meeting your tasks and deadlines. So who will you be? L. I will be yours, I heard my wife say. This was 5 years ago. But for me, this stab in the heart was just a few seconds ago. E. Come to me. I heard Erich order. "Elle, yes, wake up." Katie turned off the recording. "I have video of what happened next, but this is not the place for it," she said, waving for the waiter to bring the bill. I was in a state of shock. After Katie paid, I followed her outside like a zombie. Once in her Land Rover, I looked out the window in silence. "Your husband is an animal," I said with disgust. "Oh, he's worse," she replied. "You haven't seen the rest of the video yet." "I'm not sure I want to watch it," I replied. Somehow I got home and put the children to bed. They noticed that I was upset, but I falsely assured them that everything was fine. It's like I was complicit in deceiving my wife. But what do you tell the kids? "Well, kids, is your mom busy having sex and doing it for the last 5 years? Is this the reason we hardly see her?" The children were already wondering why she was not at home so often. Eventually, they calmed down, and I went into the office with my laptop. Katie gave me access to a secure server where videos of her adultery were stored. "Dave, this is quite graphic," she warned. "I found them difficult to watch, and I am not easily shocked. Someone else might watch these videos and think that they are just adult videos. But for you and me, these are our spouses, the people we loved and perhaps still love." I admit that I still loved him after I saw this. Love makes you think stupid things. But when I had time to think about how he used your wife and manipulated her into submission, I began to hate him. I stared at the folder called First Month for what felt like forever before I clicked on it. There were 15 entries. 15, only for the first month. After checking the dates, I noticed that the first entry was from her first time with him, recorded shortly after the audio I heard in the office ended, and I still couldn't bring myself to click play. There were videos from the day before her 2-day vacation for our daughter's first surgery, and again the night after she returned to work 2 days after surgery. How could she work knowing that her daughter was in the hospital? Little Amber's condition is still critical then. Shaking my head in disbelief, I moved on to the next folder. This time there were 19 videos. The 2 were from the same night, 3 hours apart. It seemed like they met every work night and sometimes twice. Again, I couldn't bring myself to watch them, afraid of what I might see. Each folder after that was for the following months. There were 57 folders in total. They went sequentially, covering all the months from my daughter's operation to the present. After the first 3 months, I noticed a decrease in the number of videos to about 14. Then, at the end of the 9th month, there was another surge. This month, some of the videos were filmed on the same night, and then the first recordings were made over the weekend. A quick look at my calendar on my phone showed it was Saturday, and some of them were labeled with the names of men I didn't know. First and last name. As much as I was disgusted by the idea of my wife sleeping with multiple men, I was impressed by the amount of information Kathy had collected about her infidelities. I forced myself to watch, and as Katie warned me, it was very graphic. I didn't see everything, but I saw enough. Most of the videos were of her and her boss, Erich Wise, having sex in his office and in what appeared to be a bedroom built into his office. In the first video, Lisa seemed reluctant to participate. Every time she tried to stop, he reminded her of her hopeless situation and that he could throw her out onto the street. I forced myself to watch it to see her reaction. I then watched in disgust, disappointment, and anger as she allowed her boss to do whatever he wanted to her without any resistance. At one point, I wanted to throw up. Again, what I saw was from almost 5 years ago, but to me it was raw and shocking, as if it had just happened yesterday, or tonight, since he had her again. Wise teased her and insulted me several times. Nothing belonged to me anymore and hadn't for a long time. That's what I thought. I shook my head in disgust, resigned to what I had seen. Anyone else seeing what I saw would have thought they were watching some kind of amateur adult film. But what I saw was how my wife, whom I thought left the house as a chaste married woman, turned into a slutty woman of easy virtue for her vile boss in less than half an hour. As soon as he laid out the rules of their new relationship, Lisa barely resisted and gave herself to this man voluntarily. And on top of this, she allowed herself to enjoy it. Any other man who saw this might wonder if she was faking it to please her tormentor and blackmailer. But I spent years in bed with this woman when she was my willing partner in life. I knew what she looked and sounded like. She could never fool me. She loved it, and that's all I needed to know. Before they finished, her boss told her that he wanted her to wear skirts or dresses to work every day, except on women's days, and he will check when she claims to have women's days. She had to take off her panties and bra as soon as she arrived at work, and most importantly, she had to remain married. The next video was the next day. Lisa was semi-trained by him, wearing a short dress and high heels. He scolded her for being late for work and did not want to hear about the accident with many cars that caused a traffic jam. By the fifth video, they seemed in agreement with each other. It wasn't enough that she gave in to her basic desires and enjoyed sex, depriving me of it for 5 damn years. But she also humiliated and insulted me. Crap, crap, crap. I missed the other videos of them until the day before my daughter's second surgery. Wise used her confusion to punish her. I almost cried with shame that I wasn't there to protect her. It sickened me that he was so merciless to a woman whose child was fighting for his life again. I felt sorry for her and myself as I remembered her enjoyment of sex before and after that day. Maybe before she found out what a scoundrel Wise was. But what about after? How did she allow this bastard to dominate her physically and emotionally? Was she in love with him? Not just now, but then. Already since our daughter's second operation, I could understand that she was doing this to save us from ruin and so that our daughter could undergo the operation that ultimately saved her. But this, not this, crap. I saw this in subsequent videos that I forced myself to watch. Lisa seemed joyful as she entered her boss's office, happily calling him sir in almost every sentence. Yes, sir. What do you want, sir? Did you like it, sir? How she reacted to him. I asked myself how far she had allowed herself to go with this man. How much control did she allow him to have? Then it dawned on me. The sex must have been so good, so much better than with me, that she stopped letting me have sex with her. In her mind, Erich damn Wise was her man, and I was, but what? I never gave up and never told her that she had permission to sleep with him. I wasn't her cuckold. But many people attach a label to any man whose wife has cheated. She betrays him, but the guilt and shame lie with him. Erich and Lisa openly humiliated me from the very beginning, and while playing some other videos, I heard him and then her do it again. The worst thing was hearing her say that hellish word about me. Then there were other men. To make sure that the videos with the names of other men were with her, I looked at them. She was tasked with having sex with future clients, current clients, and even some men who had nothing to do with her company. The 3 men who brought her together were friends of Erich. There were others too. Black men, tall and short men, Hispanic, Japanese, and European businessmen. I did the math, and it turns out there were 58 different names in addition to Erich fucking Wise. This bastard turned my wife into a corporate prostitute. I decided I'd had enough and turned off the laptop. What I saw was sexual and like an adult video. And yet the thought that it was my wife and how she enjoyed desecrating her pig boss disgusted me. Finally, videos of her and several men showed me that she had changed into a different person voluntarily. Not once did she turn to me for help or advice. As if in 1 hour, she swore allegiance to Erich Wise and washed her hands of me as if I were yesterday's remnant. I saw everything I needed to see and never went back. How the hell some guys look forward to their wife sleeping with other men is beyond me. But I had a certain respect for them and their promiscuous wives. Why are you talking? Because, unlike my wife, these women did not lie to their husbands. What cuckold couples did, they did together and willingly in the open air. I don't know how I managed to send my children to school and go to work. What was worse was seeing my wife come home and walk past me as if she hadn't slept with Erich, her vile boss. Most of the time she smelled clean, as if she had showered before coming home. But not the night she came back smelling of another man's sweat. I talked to Katie about the video and what I saw. In a rare moment of empathy, She reached out to place her hand on mine, and then I felt a reaction to it. Katie noticed me fidgeting and asked again if I was okay. She now held my hand with both of hers and looked at me in a way she never had before. "I know you and I met under terrible circumstances, Dave," she said, "and most likely, when this is all over, you'll try to forget about it all and about me. But you and I are members of a rare club." "Which one?" I answered, trying to calm my body. Looking into Katie's eyes and listening to her slightly hoarse voice, I could barely hold on. "We were both hurt by the same two people," she replied. "I feel close to you. Please don't look at me like that." "How do I look at you?" I asked, afraid that she knew. "Like I have horns," she replied. "Wrong," I said. "I'm the one who's horny. I haven't had sex in almost 5 years." "Oh, Dave, we need to do something about this." Who would have thought that the word "we" in a woman's mouth when it comes to sex acts like a sex pill? "Katie," I said, trying not to laugh, "you just made this sad and miserable man feel alive again. Like a man." She blushed and almost removed her hands from mine, but instead she squeezed my hand tightly, leaned across the table, and kissed me. "We had sex. And yes, you are better than my husband." "Thanks, but I saw the video," I replied. "I didn't say that to boost your ego, Dave. I meant it." "Well, thank you. My male ego is beaten." I stopped short of saying 5 years. As for Erich, he lost my respect a long time ago, before we separated. By that time, I realized that he is a man of small character and personality. You understand that Erich is an asshole, don't you? A selfish and narcissistic asshole. Yes, the fact that he slept with my wife for 5 years and abused me while doing it confirmed his status as an asshole. Not to mention the fact that he took advantage of a woman under stress because her child was dying. "I hate him so much," she said. "I hate him." It was clear that Katie hated her husband, but I think she hated herself for choosing him as her mate, for giving him the power that he used to manipulate women like my wife. "Let it out, sister," I egged her on. "And I hate your damn wife," she added. This surprised me, but not as much as I thought. "Don't start me off," I said. After a moment of silence, she spoke in a low and decisive tone. "Dave, we need revenge." I needed to know. Katie is back in Chicago on business. At least that's what she said. But I didn't insist. She was honest enough to say that she had an occasional lover there, so I just assumed that he would be the object of her attention while she was there. "Trying not to wear it out while I'm gone," she said. "I know you haven't had much time, and you want to make up for lost time. I understand." "I'll try," I replied. "Poor girl," she said at first, and then smiled and added, "Happy girl." The next day I went to work with a smile and a different attitude. My friends noticed that I slept with someone. Randy laughed at me and raised his fist in approval. Sheila, on the other hand, shook her head and gave me the middle finger when no one was looking. Later that day, I cornered her near the copier and stationery closet. "What do you want?" she asked. I didn't give her time to react when I kissed her. "Have sex with me," she said as I pulled away. "Later today?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. She seemed lost in thought. "Okay, long lunch?" "I'll tell you soon," I replied. "What's gotten into you?" she asked. I smiled. "To hell with it. Wait for lunch," I said. "Let's go now." HR will not be happy with us. We had sex in their conference room. And she wasn't alone in my newfound sexual freedom. Freed to go out, I began an affair with a divorced mother from my child's school. Then there was a nice receptionist in the gym, and a student waitress in a restaurant where I took my children. I know I overdid it in the beginning, but I needed to make up for lost time and throw out the accumulated energy. I have to admit, I enjoyed it. Nothing boosts the ego like a new conquest. But since it was just sexy, without much intimacy, the aftertaste was disappointing. I felt empty because, having experienced intimacy and sexual drive, I missed the former while enjoying the latter. It bothered me that I missed her. What bothered me was what I heard on the recordings. It was a conversation between Lisa and Erich about sex in my house. If she did this, and I had proof that she brought him there, it would be useful as a bargaining chip. And not only for our inevitable confrontation, but also for the upcoming dispute over child custody rights. I wrote down what tape it was on, and this was recently, just a month ago. I remembered it was after their first round of fun, and they were enjoying the afterglow on the bed. So, this Wednesday again? At your place before you leave for work? Yes, she answered. Be there at 10. David has his weekly meeting with his boss at that time, and he never misses it. We'll have 2 hours before I start getting ready for work, so we should be safe. I love having sex on your bed and his, Erich said. I told you that in marriage there is a special thrill from sex, didn't I? You are preaching to an already converted Erich, she replied. This last year they called each other by their first names. Gone are the days when she called him Sir. If anything, the dominant, submissive aspect of their relationship was just the highlight that they explored. But not always. Lisa became attached to her boss, just as he became attached to her. You don't sleep with someone for 5 years and form some sort of attachment. Again, the Police song came to mind. When you realize that your servant has become your master. How appropriate. So, it was a Wednesday at 10 in the morning after I left for work. I smiled to myself and began my plan. Logging into Amazon, I ordered cameras with Bluetooth and audio and paid extra for next-day delivery. When they arrived at my office in Abberton, I took them home and installed them in every room of our house. I spent a small fortune, but by this point I could afford it. Figuring the action would take place there, I splurged on cameras in the bedroom, installing 5 that were motion-activated and connected to the internet on my phone, just like others in the house, and cameras at the front and back doors. When Wednesday arrived, it was difficult to concentrate on the meeting. When it was my turn to give my report, I did it briefly and clearly so that I could sit down without making a fool of myself, and I succeeded. I checked the recorded streams in the privacy of my office, and a little before noon, I saw my wife and her boss live on my bed. As painful as it was to hear, after 5 years without intimacy, after seeing what she did and said, I was no longer shocked. In fact, I welcomed her words. Now I had proof that she brought a man into our house where our children could see her. While this was beneficial for the guardianship in my favor, it was even more important for my own peace of mind. Our wedding was beyond repair after this complete and total act of disrespect on her part. When I turned off the video, I breathed a sigh of relief, knowing that this ordeal would soon be over. It turned out that I was both right and wrong. I was going to drink another cup of coffee while waiting for Lisa to come home. At that moment, I heard the garage door lock click. I logged out and closed my laptop, making sure it was securely locked. After the door closed, I heard her heels clicking on the tiles from the door to the stairs. As she passed the office, she looked inside. Realizing that I was looking at her, she turned away. I'll take a shower and go to bed. The kids are fine. I'm glad you asked, I replied. She paused for a moment, her back to me, then continued walking towards the bedroom. In case she left the door open, I followed her quietly. And of course, she left, allowing me to open the door as soon as she unbuttoned her dress. As soon as she noticed me, she stopped undressing. But it was too late for her phone, which I saw on her dressing table along with her purse. Leave it alone, she hissed. What are you doing here? I live here, and this is my home and bedroom, I answered, moving towards her. And let's say I don't want you to write anything down. David, what are you doing? She said, stepping back, trying not to scream and wake the children. After making sure her phone was turned off, I put it in my back pocket. Then, closing the door, I approached her again as she tried to decide if she could get to the bathroom and close the door before I stopped her. Looking in that direction, I smiled at her as if nothing had happened. Do you want to have a game? I asked. Go ahead. Try it. To her credit, she tried, but I was too fast for her, and she whimpered as I caught her and pulled her back, throwing her on the bed. David, that's enough, she said desperately. Why are you doing this? Leave me alone. Take off that dress, I said, looking at her sternly. No, just leave. First of all, forget about me leaving. And second of all, if you don't take it off, I'll tear it up on you. She looked like a hunted animal at that moment. She tried to decide what to do and saw no way out. Okay, she replied. I'll take it off. I don't want you to rip it. I crossed my arms and looked at her sternly. Watching me, she finished unbuttoning her dress and took it off her shoulders. When she stopped, hoping I would be pleased, I motioned for her to continue. She frowned and pulled her arms out, letting the dress fall past her breasts to her waist. That's when I noticed bruises on her chest and neck. But I let her continue. She was in the process of lowering her dress to the floor and getting out of it when she realized I was looking at her bruises and gasping. At that moment, I quickly walked over and grabbed her. No bra and no panties, I said, as if I were a fire inspector checking the batteries in a fire alarm. And oh, what do we have here? No, she gasped. That's what you should have told the guy you slept with tonight, assuming it was the same guy you've been hooking up with since our daughter got sick. She tensed at this moment. Please, no more, she said. So you've got it all figured out. There comes your high ick, I mocked her. It's a shame you didn't use it sooner. Maybe you would have realized that what you did would destroy our family. What do you mean? You are the one who filed for separation and wants a divorce. I don't want our family to break up. Family, I chuckled. It's a laugh. Dave, please. Oh, am I Dave again? Actually, I'm used to David now. Don't even think about trying to force your rotten body on me. I'd need 3 disease tests to be sure. And after what I know about what you do with your boss and others, I won't be able to have sex with you. I saw her wince, but continued. For the record, since our lawyers agreed, I tried this sex during our separation, and now I know that at least 2 other women forced me to stand up and fight for a good cause. You, on the other hand, did not. Then, what you did was disgusting to me. You are disgusting to me. She looked at me shyly, but I didn't see any remorse or even jealousy. It was a performance, and, to be honest, I was glad. I didn't care if she had a feeling of guilt or the last feeling of ownership. She got rid of these concepts a long time ago. How much do you know? That's it, I replied. From the very first day you and Wise had fun in his office, to you sleeping with him over and over again for 5 years. Also the names of every bastard you allowed to get close to you except him. What you did with his golf buddies. Very sophisticated. He made me do it to pay off the loans, she tried to justify herself. Oh, I know how it all started, I replied. Erich was a scumbag who took advantage of a subordinate's difficult situation. The way he played you that first day made me feel sorry for you, at first. What do you mean? I had to put up with him to pay off the loans. I was starting to get seriously annoyed. First of all, the loans could have been paid off earlier with the kind of money he gave you so you wouldn't give it up. Instead, you saved most of that money without telling me about it. I thought about it after I found out. You could pay off the loans and be free from him. But when you continued to work those long hours after we got the money, I realized that there was something more to it. Plus, the way you cut me off sexually, I understand. You had another lover, and you voluntarily went to him. She looked at me defiantly, but did not answer. Secondly, it only took him one time. 30 minutes. Just half an hour for you to forget me and become his bitch. I saw everything. I knew that look. I saw it. Only it wasn't from someone who loved you, but from someone who used you. I had no choice, she repeated. He may have cornered you into having sex, but you chose to give him the satisfaction of knowing he had you. You didn't just give him your body, Lisa. You gave him all of you. He had you from the very beginning. If not from the first day, then certainly from the second. It was clear that Lisa was tense, crystal clear, but she didn't deny it. How do you know all this? Then her expression changed to one of shock and fear. Wait, what do you mean, Saul? His wife, Katie, installed video surveillance in his office, video of every encounter you and Erich had. Also, all the guys he brought for you to sleep with in his office, either on his desk or in that bedroom behind a cabinet with an office and a copy machine. "Oh God," she said, covering her face with her hands. "Did you see all this?" Once I saw the most important parts, I stopped. Even then, I missed a lot. But like I said, I saw what mattered. Not just the sex, but your reaction to it. You enjoyed it. Admit it. It's as if you were born for this lifestyle, how attached you are to it. Cheating, humiliation, betrayal. But the two worst things you did were that you enjoyed it, and that you joined your lover in humiliating me. I could ask you why you did it. I could ask, what did I do to you to deserve this? But I understand that you probably have some excuses, and it doesn't matter anymore. The important thing is that I know who you are. If I ever feel guilty about our breakup, I'll watch a video of you and fucking Erich talking about me. Our lawyers will handle everything. Know this, I have detailed records of all the activities with the children that you missed, and records of you being with him or with other men. I also have a video of you bringing him to our house, where our children live and could see it. It was during work hours and their school hours. You wouldn't have seen it. Good luck with that and the judge, I replied, waving my hand in her direction. Dave, please don't do this. Don't destroy us. The kids need both of us. I was here for them, Lisa. Not you. I did the parenting while you were busy servicing your boss. He chose you to enjoy the sex and use of a married woman. Don't fight me for custody, Lisa. I'll agree to liberal visits every week for you and the kids if you want. I'm not a monster. Unless, of course, you're busy. But you'll only have them. I don't want your boss to approach them. She closed her eyes, her face turned away. As her lip trembled and tears began to flow, I think she finally realized how deep she had gone. Whether it was regret or anger at being caught didn't matter anymore. The next 2 days were tense as we saw each other casually at night. I caught her looking at me, only this time she didn't look away as usual. Do you want to know why? She asked. It's starting, I thought. Not especially at the moment. It'll either be bullshit or something to hurt me. But to show you that I don't care anymore, come on. Tell me why I wasn't good enough. I can handle it. She took a deep breath, collecting her thoughts, then smiled with detachment as if reliving some memorable moment. It was nice from the beginning, she blurted out with the same look. Erich using me was fantastic. Knife in the stomach from the very beginning. Great start, Lisa. No matter how prepared I thought I was for it, it still hurt to hear it coming from her own mouth. But I rolled my eyes so she wouldn't think she had offended me. Continue. I waved my hand and crossed my arms. Let it all out. When he told me about his plans for me, I was shocked that someone would do that to someone in my situation. It was cold and so selfish. Not to mention it was sexist and against everything I thought a boss would dare to say to a female employee these days. But when I realized that I had no choice but to obey him, everything changed. How so? I don't know if it was my curiosity, how her eyes seemed to sparkle when she remembered her feelings, or both. I was finally getting answers, and even if they were painful, I decided to listen in order to move on. David, there was no doubt that we needed surgery for Amber, and there was no doubt that we needed the money. Even if we sold the house and used our 401k, it wouldn't be enough. You and I couldn't do it. By giving me the money to pay for the surgery and a way to get it back, it seemed like he had worked a miracle. It was a carrot. So when he said he could pay a doctor to not operate on our daughter, she shook her head. Well, there was no choice anymore. He backed me into a corner that I knew, and he knew there was no way out of. It was a stick. I no longer had the choice that I thought I had, she continued. Some people believe that marriage takes away a woman's choice, but they are wrong. A woman can choose many things when married because our husbands, no matter how they are portrayed as man-haters, are rarely controlling. If anything, they are easy to manipulate and control us. By women. We ladies decide whether we will be good mothers or not, whether we will be good wives or not, whether we will be honest or truthful with our husbands, or whether we will take lovers or not. Marriage was not my trap or cage. You never made me feel controlled by patriarchy or anything like that is instilled on college campuses these days. But I was still trapped, because of my own expectations of life. Some would say that society instilled these ideas in me. Ever since I was a child, I heard that I could do anything, be anyone and do anything. And of course, it all sounded dizzying, but I liked it, and I chose it. In fact, the most limiting restrictions we set are ourselves. I chose my goals and decided to have it all. You were the icing on the cake. I married the most handsome man I had ever seen, a sexy man who was good in bed and loved me. Children were another part of that you can have everything mentality that I adopted, until Amber got sick. Then everything fell apart. All the dreams and hopes, everything I thought I had, seemed on the verge of being lost once I reached that having it all moment. And on top of that, I had to become someone's sexy toy. There are no words to explain to you. Not just you, but to anyone what it felt like to know that you no longer have control or choice. I sat down on the chair opposite her, wondering who this man I had married was. She was definitely not the one I knew before Erich took her away. More precisely, before she gave herself to him. Right after I gave in to him, thinking it would be practically non-consensual sex, I changed. In a matter of seconds, I gave up all the choices I had or thought I had. Actually, there was no choice. As Erich said, Amber had to live, and as a mother, I had to do everything possible to make it happen, Dave. How could it be? You're deceiving me, I replied in disbelief. He could have sold me into slavery, forced me to have sex on the streets, sold my organs on the black market, and done things I never thought possible. Instead, he freed me. He's what? Her lips curved into a slight smile, first to herself and then to me. He freed me from all ideas and beliefs. He freed me from stress, choice, and the possibility of failure and consequences. He took it all away. The price for saving Amber's life was that he gained control over my body. You're confused, I replied. Erich Wise has brainwashed you. I thought so too at first, she replied, looking at me again with the same smile. It wasn't a smirk or a condescending smile. It was a smile I had seen before. The smile of someone who knows something I didn't know. My mother had that smile the day I told her something that she thought was stupid and I thought was true. It doesn't matter what it is, I forgot. But at that moment Lisa let me know that she had reached her peak and seen the light. But not me. Erich just opened the door to this new world and new life for me. At that moment I understood and became convinced that Erich would not break his promise. And he never did. When the first operation failed, it was he who found another doctor to help the first. He is the one who not only paid the additional expenses, but also freed me from having to pay them back, because by that time, Erich was as attached to me as I was to him. You look at me in disbelief, she continued. You see, our deal was clear and concise. I will be his concubine, his toy, in exchange for Erich saving our girl. We both know you couldn't do what he did, David. He may have been the one who made that dirty proposition to me, but I never had a choice, Dave. I know it hurts you, but at that moment you and I ceased to exist as a couple. You couldn't save our child. All you could do was helplessly watch her fate from the sidelines. Erich had the power to give her a chance at life, and when it came to choosing, there was no doubt. I know this hurts you, Dave, because I know how much you love our children. If you had to cut out your heart to save one of them, I know you would. You would steal and kill them, and if the choice was to leave me for this, you would throw me overboard to the sharks. Don't shake your head. I know you would. But that's not what Amber needed. She needed what Erich could provide, and you couldn't. As a parent whose concern for the child is more important than your own ego, you would have fallen to your knees and done unimaginable things if he asked you, not me. She looked at me sympathetically and nodded. But because he didn't ask you, I had to obey and do what he wanted. If you're looking for repentance from me, You won't find it, David. I was backed into a corner and would do it again if I had to. But there's another part that I talked about before, and it ties into your question of why I liked it, and why I gave Erich the satisfaction of knowing that I liked it. You deserve an answer. But there's no short answer, I'm afraid. There were 4 periods in my relationship with him after this all started, and each of them brought different emotions and awakenings. The first stage began as soon as I walked into his office 5 years ago. As he spoke, I was so shocked by the value of his help that I could not believe it was true. As he continued, I realized that the situation was not only real, but also inevitable. Deep in the back of my mind, I knew where this was going. Instinctively, I reacted like the spoiled, successful woman I was before the diagnosis. I was still living the illusion of female power. She shook her head and grinned mockingly. I told him no, and he was going to throw me out of his office, fire me, and kick me out of the building. When he started to turn his back, I asked. No, I begged him to leave me and let me submit to him. Yes, let me. My submission to Erich didn't start after sex. It started before. Sex was just sealing the deal that I couldn't refuse, and I knew it even before I told him that I was submitting to him. Before I said no, and he almost threw me out. At first, I didn't want to admit it to myself, but the reality is that I obeyed when I asked another man to be my benefactor and protector. I could have told him to go to hell. Poor Amber would have died, and we would have had another child after how we would mourn her. I was shocked that she would talk about our girl in such indifferent terms. She must have noticed it on my face because she pursed her lips and grinned. Oh yes, David, we're back at it again. I know what pisses you off. In choosing to save Amber, I sacrificed my marital virtue and your ego. My marital fidelity was mine to give, but your ego was not. To protect it for you, I would have to sacrifice our daughter. Sorry, David, she shook her head at me. But our girl's life was more important. I tried to protect that by hiding the truth from you. Most of my extramarital affairs took place on BCE territory, where you had no access. No one there knew that my office had a door to Erich's office. Thus, you won't know. But I found out, I replied, trying to pull myself together. I felt numb from everything Lisa said, but her frankness made me listen. I deserved to know, no matter how terrible it was. Only by chance, because there was surveillance that even Erich didn't know about. If it hadn't been there, you would still think that I was engrossed in work. But there was also your personal inadequacy that you faced. Please don't deny, David. You knew that you were not able to save our daughter. What my company could and did, I saw it. The thing is, David, you're right to some extent. Although I chose to give my body to Erich to save Amber, I didn't give myself to him until he forced me to serve him. What I saw in him was a man who had the power to give our children what you could not. His authority, wealth, and audacity were and remain an endless aphrodisiac. I know it hurts you, but it's the truth. It doesn't matter that Erich is also handsome, fit, and well-built. The sex was amazing, and yes, I enjoyed it all. I can see that you don't believe it. Well, let me ask you a question. You say you had sex recently. How did it feel knowing you were still married? And don't tell me a lawyer's advice about sex during separation made it enjoyable. That's how bodies react. And while we're at it, that rule applies to me now. But that exam you did earlier was borderline non-consensual sex. Don't ever try that again. If you want sex, just say it. Don't hold your breath, I snapped back. She laughed at that and then simply smiled and nodded. Anyway, so the day I talked to you about my new job, I was already his. I just didn't know how much yet. I still had this illusion that I could control both of you. That somehow you and I can eat some semblance of marriage when I went to work and gave my body to the boss. All of that went out the window when Amber's condition worsened and she needed a second operation. You were devastated and helpless. Instead, I couldn't wait to tell Erich about it and ask him for help. The help Erich provided was immediate that day. Later, I thanked him as he wanted, grateful that he existed and that I had made the right choice. No matter how cold Erich was that first day I became his, He was there when I needed him. With that last phrase, she cut me to the core. I spent 5 years looking after our children while she cheated all night long. I knew your heart grew cold, Lisa. But the fact that you are telling me this is a new test for you. You wanted to know so you could move on, didn't you? Was her answer. You needed honesty, right? Did you want me to grovel and tell you nonsense like it wasn't what it seemed? She raised an eyebrow at me as I forced myself to calm down. When I did this, she continued, and this was the second stage of my relationship with him. I didn't love Erich, but I was in awe of his abilities and presence. Loving a person like him is impossible. I had this with you before Amber got sick. What happened made me realize that I would never have this again, at least not after I betrayed you over and over again every day. I may have humiliated myself, but I still have a little conscience left. That's why I avoided sex with you after that. It was a reminder of our past that will never return. Why didn't you talk to me? Oh, David, seriously, what would this conversation be like? Honey, do we need to talk? I had to have sex with my boss for the money we need for our daughter's surgery. By the way, am I now his work bitch and personal woman of easy virtue? Are you serious? If I did something stupid like that, you'd run away, and I need you to watch the kids at night. Nanny, I snapped. You only saw me as your nanny. No, David. I have never doubted that you are the only person I can trust with our children while I work. Mrs. Bronsky is the nanny. She just looks after them at night, or for a few hours when we are not home. You are their father. You love them and will always love them. Knowing that you would be home to look after them made my life easier. Could be worse. What do you mean? Finding out why Erich decided not to humiliate you marked the beginning of the third stage of my relationship with him. You don't think it was humiliating for him to have sex with my wife every day? You know this now, but I never planned for you to find out. I did my best to make sure Erich didn't know this. You know what a cuckold is, don't you? What? Yes, I know. A guy whose wife cheats on him, I answered, using the standard definition for most people. That's an old opinion, she said, waving what I described. It was a disdain for men that needed to be redefined. A cuckold these days is a guy who willingly watches his wife having sex with others and approves of it. They often convince their wives to do this and arrange for it. What does this have to do with our situation? I once told Erich that he was cruel. After he corrected me, he said that I was wrong. That cruelty would be to bring you to a meeting on the first day and force you to agree to the terms he gave me and force you to watch. She was waiting for my reaction. I would. I started to protest. You wouldn't have done anything, David, she interrupted. If he had done that, there would have been security outside, just like when he laid out his terms to me on the first day. If you refused, they would tie you to a chair and force you to watch. But listen, David. He told me that although it would be an ego boost for him to see me humiliated, he decided not to do it for some reason. Erich did some checking on who you are. He told me that he was convinced that you, like me, would rather save our daughter's life than your ego. And if you had agreed to watch him desecrate me, you would have been completely useless as a father to your children. How nice of him. Maybe I should send him a thank you note attached to your body. Nice touch, David, but not necessary. But let's get back to business. Erich had a selfish reason for not doing this. He knew that me turning into his prostitute was enough stress for me that I could handle it. This meant that you had to not know what I was doing so that you could raise the children and take care of them. I knew that the children were in good hands. What he didn't count on was my inability to have sex with him and then come home and do it to you. He wanted me to stay married to you and on good terms. He encouraged me to have sex with you, but I had a problem with it. Give me a few minutes, I said. I need to use the bathroom. Sure, I'll take a shower if that's okay, and I'll meet you downstairs. In the bathroom, I started crying like a baby, realizing how long ago and how my marriage had broken down. My wife sacrificed this at the altar of parenthood. She was right. My ego made me jealous and angry. But I knew that she did what she thought was right at that moment. And realizing this, I thought about myself. Would I give in and let him take my wife before my eyes? Would I agree to his deal? Just the thought of it made me want to puke. And not just the image of it, but the reluctant acceptance of it for the sake of my daughter's life. And that it would destroy me in the process. I managed to pull myself together when I heard the shower stop in the master bedroom. Lisa has finished and will be out soon. Now there was no doubt that I would listen to the rest of her story. After washing my face and quickly brushing my teeth, I exit the family bathroom that my children use. I quickly check on my son Kyle and then head to my daughter's room. I don't neglect my son, but everyone knows I favor Amber. Even Kyle says he understands. You almost lost her, Dad, he told me one night as she slept on the couch, and we played video games. I understand that you love her more. I don't love her anymore, Kyle, I corrected him. I love her differently. But you're right. Sometimes I look at her and think it's a miracle she's here. Am I a miracle? Kyle asked. Yes, it is. You both are a miracle. I came back and kissed the army's sleeping son, as I had done before, and vowed to continue to show him my love until the day I died. I then walked down the hall to our daughter's room and opened the half-open door. Next to her bed, watching her breathe in her sleep, stood my wife Lisa, now in a robe. This evening was the longest we had talked and spent together as a family in a long time. I looked at this stranger in my daughter's room and wondered if I had ever known her. Perhaps we got married too young. Did she have some dark secret that I missed? Has she cheated on me before, and I never put two and two together? These thoughts occur not only in men, but also in women whose spouses cheat. But as I looked at her over our daughter, I realized that she had made her choice. And I was surprised that I didn't judge her for submitting sexually to Erich Wise that first day. He put her in an impossible position where refusal meant the probable death of our girl. Lisa was right. We have exhausted all possibilities of getting money ourselves. Our parents didn't have that kind of money, and neither did my sister after her divorce. We now had enough money, but that didn't fix all the pain Erich had caused our marriage with my wife's help. I stood next to Lisa, crossing my arms over my chest, keeping my distance from her. My poor sleeping girl had no idea what had happened to keep her alive, and what price her parents paid for her precious size. As Lisa reached over to straighten her blanket, I left the room and headed to the kitchen for a bottle of water. When she came into the kitchen and sat down, I handed her my bottle and took another. Then I sat down opposite her. When I opened my mouth to speak, she raised her hand. Can I finish what I started telling you? Your turn, I said, feeling stupid for using a phrase I'd heard my grandfather say countless times. He explained to me that it had to do with telephone booths and the fact that you had to put in a coin to make a call. I was going to tell you, she said, screwing the cap on the bottle, why I stopped having sex with you. Yes, I answered. Or as you've said many times over the years, no, not today. Like I said, she continued, ignoring my joke, I stopped having sex with you for a reason. It's one thing to have sex with another man behind your back, but it's another thing to come home and give you the dirty leftovers. It must. That must be the explanation, she hissed back. Just listen, Dave. I ignored Dave and looked at her, waiting for her to strike me again. The more she talked, the worse it got, and the more I realized we were done. Like I said, Erich wanted our marriage to continue. He thought it would be good for me to keep in touch with you at home. But, listen, I interrupted her. You explained how sex with him was better than sex with me, and how now you are his submissive. Whatever it is, I get it. If you need to talk it out and free yourself from guilt or lack thereof, see a psychologist. David, you. David, I don't care. Fuck you, fuck Erich and everything you did. I don't give a damn how you felt after you decided he was the man. Before I won the lottery, I was stupid enough to think that you and I have a chance to make things right. I know it's stupid and naive of me, but I thought so. As soon as I saw your reaction that day, I knew that it was all over. I watched the video, and it was just the nail in the coffin. If I need to know how you felt during those times, I can rewatch them or watch the ones I missed. So if you don't have anything constructive, let's get to what I need to say. She looked at me for a few seconds, but I no longer knew who this person was and no longer cared. For the sake of the kids, Dave, we should stay together until they're older. If you want, we can make a postnuptial agreement that allows us to stay here with the kids. Let's leave it at that, and you can go on dates whenever you want. No, I said, that ship has sailed. I told you that you should move into an apartment, and we should end this farce. You said you've changed and are living a new life. Well, I want a new life too, without having to see your smug face. Dave, I don't want to leave. I want us to. What do you want us to do, Lisa? For us to pretend to be a normal couple, sleeping in separate rooms. How long do you think the kids won't notice? The kids talk at school, and they find out from other kids that parents who aren't together, not together. Then we'll sleep together, she answered. That's right, I replied. You, me, and traces of sex with Wise, or whoever he forced to have sex with you this evening. You're crazy. I won't sleep next to you. Once the separation is over, you don't belong in this house. And if he told you he would hire expensive lawyers, he needs to check who controls his company. It's Mrs. Wise, and she hired every lawyer worth her salt to be on my side. Wow, she said in a quiet tone, pretending to be shocked. Katie will do this for you. She did this before she contacted me. She'll be leaving soon and going back to her boyfriend in Chicago, Lisa mocked. It's her choice, I replied. There are other fish in the sea. I'm still too young to catch other fish, and you can continue your games with your Nazi boyfriend. He's Austrian, Lisa tried to correct me. Where Hitler comes from, I reminded her. I thought he was German. Call your college and ask for a refund, I said and stood up. I'm going to bed. Your phone is on your dresser. Now you can call your master and give him a report. Lisa was a shining example of the fact that a high IQ does not compensate for incomplete education. As soon as I was in my room, I texted Katie. We talked. She didn't deny anything and was proud of everything she did. Katie, are you okay? I will. How did things go for you? Katie, I'll send you a photo. Log into my secure server from your computer. Give me a couple of minutes. A few seconds later, I was downstairs in the office, opening my laptop. I logged in and logged into Katie's photo server. Of course, she sent me a photo of what she was doing there. I giggled, then laughed as I picked up the phone and called the bastard's wife. She answered immediately. Remind me never to cross paths with you, I said jokingly. Unlike my idiot soon-to-be ex-husband, you're not stupid. So, are you coming over tonight or putting it off until tomorrow morning? Are you back in town? I asked, catching myself with too much enthusiasm. Yes, I'm back. I'm finishing up business in Chicago and moved here for good. There are problems at BCE that I need to solve personally. I'll tell you more tomorrow. After thinking about it, I'm tired from everything I had to do today and from the flight. For what I'm planning, I need to be fresh. And you? Yes, me too. Let's do it in the morning, I agreed. I need to sleep for my big role, Mrs. Demel. What's next? Quotes from Casablanca. This is the beginning of a beautiful friendship. He said, beautiful friendship, dumbass. Katie laughed, correcting me. See you tomorrow. 10 o'clock in the morning. I'll be ready. Good night, Felicia, I said, and as I pressed the end call button on my cell phone, I heard her laugh. I smiled, surprised at how Katie's return to town made me feel. The next day at 9:55 I was at the mansion. I rolled down the driver's window and pressed the button at the gate. There must have been a security camera there because the gate opened before I could introduce myself. Driving inside, I noticed a gatehouse covered in foliage, making it almost invisible from the street. The guard waved me through to the long road leading to the main mansion. For a second or two, I thought I was in Europe, looking at the castle. Stone walls, towers, and everything else, but without a moat and a drawbridge. Instead, there was a sleek, modern double door of polished wood and stained glass that looked as expensive as my car. I had some money now after winning the lottery, but the place was probably worth 10 times my entire fortune, which I had to share with Lisa. Then I realized how rich Katie and her family are. They had a mansion in Illinois, but they kept this one as a spare for visits. And she had a family ranch mansion, and a condominium in New York overlooking the park, and a yacht in the Mediterranean, and a private jet, and God knows what else. My initial analysis of her was correct. Power and money were part of who she was, not just something she had or inherited when her father died. There were many times I wondered why Katie would spend time and even have sex with me, of all people. She should have known that she was much higher in status than me. I mean, she was beautiful on the outside, but there were women with less money and connections who mattered more. So why? But in a sense, she was right. We were connected because our spouses were having sexual relations behind our backs. I assumed that once she got her revenge by sleeping with the husband of the woman Erich cheated with, she and I would be done. Until then, I enjoyed the charms of Katie Sanchez Wise and was grateful. But there was more to it than just that. But what exactly? Why was I glad she came back? I've had no shortage of female company since Katie left. However, meetings with Sheila and the others were less frequent and less enjoyable. The thrill of forbidden sex with a colleague gradually faded away. In fact, I canceled a date with her and turned down her invitations twice this week. I think she understood and didn't mind. These things happen, right? As for the others, I know it sounds corny, but they were just fleeting connections. Nothing more. And I have to admit, I found as much pleasure in communicating with Katie Sanchez Wise as I did in sexual encounters with her, and even looked forward to it. However, all the issues with my wife remained unresolved and, in a sense, too fresh. Everything was difficult. While these thoughts were running through my head, the door opened. I expected to see the butler who would open the door and announce me to the lady of the house. Instead, I was greeted by Katie herself. "Hey, handsome," she said, grabbing me by the shirt and pulling me inside. Before I could say anything, I shook my head in disbelief when she kissed me. "Did you miss me?" she asked. "Honestly, yes. Don't let it get to your head, but I missed you too." "Is everything okay in Chicago?" I asked politely. "Just business matters, but we have business to do here." I thought we were going up to her bedroom, but instead she led me to the elevator, which took us down what I thought was 5 floors. "Where are we going?" "To my underground lair," she answered with a funny, villainous laugh. "I feel used," I replied. She led me through the door into the large bedroom. I've never seen a round bed except in movies. "Is this a bunker for the apocalypse?" I asked with a slight smile. She stopped to look at me, then motioned for me to sit next to her on the small sofa that was designed for 2. "This is a private place that few people know about. This part of the mansion was built in the late 50s during the nuclear war, so the owners built an expensive underground shelter for their family. It was closed for decades after the early 70s. My father then bought the estate and spent the survey. When this place was found, he repaired it. This is unlike any bunker I've ever thought of seeing." "No, it's not. But it's very, very private," Katie said, standing up. "Whatever suits us for today's business." I looked at her in confusion as she walked towards the curtains. Pushing them aside, she opened the metal double door, which she quickly opened with a key. "I might need your help," she said, beckoning me over. Never in my wildest dreams could I have imagined what was open inside. More precisely, whom, because in the center of the empty room there was a man tied naked to a wheelchair. The man was none other than Erich Wise. When he realized who I was, he tried to break free of his bonds and groaned again, trying to speak. Of course, he succeeded in neither, much to his wife's delight. "Poor Erich," said Katie mockingly. "Help me move it into the bedroom, Dave, please." I didn't know what was on her mind and wanted to ask, but it was clear from the look on her face that this did not bode well for her husband and my wife's former boss. So I pushed his wheelchair out of that room and into the master bedroom. This will do, she pointed to the end of the bed. And be kind, Dave, take off your clothes. When I placed his chair where his wife asked, I leaned towards Erich's ear. After she finishes what she has planned, you and I have our own scores to settle, bastard. Remember that. When my father found this place, it had been abandoned for a while, Katie said, ignoring Erich. Obviously, the previous owner had a bondage addiction that was a little on the extreme side. There were a lot of toys and bondage devices in the collection that are now in storage. And they still work. Look how he's chained to that chair. By this time, I had already undressed, as did Katie. So, what's the plan? I asked. In this, she whispered to me, this is my revenge, and I hope yours. She then turned and sat on the edge of the bed, facing her husband. You realize that you and I are finished, Erich, don't you? He tried to say something, but the look in his eyes said more. By this point, even an idiot would have realized what was going on. Calm down, Erich. I checked this place, and unlike your office, there are no cameras here. Forget about any possibility of revenge after tonight, or even ever being close enough to hurt me or David and his family. As you know, I'm damn rich, and I'll do anything to make sure we're well guarded. I've known for a long time that you were cheating on me. After all, people of our status rarely remain faithful to their spouses. As long as you had girls, it suited me. But what you did to Dave's wife was disgusting, even for you. I'm wondering if you tried this trick with other women, or if Lisa Henderson was the first one you manipulated into being your slave. Either way, this is not going to end well for you. You thought you were so smart, didn't you? You're probably thinking that even if we get divorced, which we will, you'll still have a majority of BCE shares and remain in your position. That's not entirely true. Remember a few years ago when you took the company public to attract capital for growth? Erich was silent at this point. He was probably wondering where this conversation was going, and to be honest, me too. Well, when you did that, you were left with a majority share of the shares, which gave you control. But my family bought the rest. Since my family gave you BCE since our marriage, that makes half of your shares mine. Now, I know that I will lose a lot when we divide our assets, but you will no longer be the owner of BCE and will not be its CEO. So you're probably wondering what's going on here. Why the bedroom? Why is my lover here? And why are you naked? Well, I love having sex in bedrooms. Only I don't have sex with other people's spouses in their house when these spouses are at work. And I don't take parents whose children are dying and turn them into my sex slaves. And I would never consider paying a doctor not to perform an operation as you threatened Dave's wife. What kind of sick bastard does that? But since you love sex so much, let's see how much you enjoy watching the man whose wife you slept with have sex with your wife. And yes, he already had sex with me, and that was wonderful. Erich's eyes widened. Now you guessed what her plan was, and so do I. The next thing that happened was revenge sex of the highest quality. Katie and I did everything sexy we could think of in front of an angry Erich Wise. From his position at the foot of the bed, he had first place in this performance. You know, Erich, she hissed at him. He's better than you ever were with me. Dave is the perfect lover for me. Just right. But you know what makes him better? He never hurts me. I plan to have sex with him as much as he allows. And I will make you watch. You're disgusting, I said, shaking my head with a grin. But you can't help it, can you? For some reason, I wanted him to answer. You made me do it. You're the last one who can claim to be a victim of coercion, Erich, I spat back. You are a disgusting person. There's one funny thing I've noticed about people like him. Give them the ability to bully and use people, and they will do it. Many men are big, have power, but do not abuse it. But people like Erich simply cannot resist. And like school bullies, when confronted, they cower and retreat like cowards. I decided to check this by freeing him from his shackles. What are you doing? Katie asked, sitting up. Erich, I said, looking at him menacingly. Sit here like a good boy and watch me have sex with your wife. But until we're done, you'll sit here and watch. I turned around as he started to get up. If you even think about attacking me, I will beat you to a pulp. Stop looking at me with defiance, otherwise I will beat you just for fun. If you've ever seen scoundrels like him cower like cowards, it's priceless. He didn't leave. My biggest concern in divorcing my wife Lisa was the children. I didn't want them to lose their mother, but she and I could no longer live together. Our relationship as husband and wife ended a long time ago. Now we simply coexisted, just like the last 5 years. However, the children were still young. Kyle was 10 and Amber was 8. They were still at a tender age. I wondered how they would cope and what kind of mark it would leave on them. But one day, when I was preparing breakfast for them, they let me know how wrong I was to worry about them. "Where is Mommy this time?" Amber asked. "Not with us, that's for sure," Kyle replied. I said nothing. Jenny Kirby from school said her mom has a boyfriend. "Isn't she married?" asked Kyle. "That doesn't stop her," Amber said. "Dad, do all moms have boyfriends when they're married?" Before I could respond, Kyle spoke. "Dad, you know Mom has a boyfriend, right?" "Why do you think so?" I asked. "Think about it, Dad. She's never here, and even after winning the lottery, she continued to work. She didn't have to do that, and even after she left that company, she still spends most of her time away from the us." I looked at both of them, noticing that they were waiting for my answer. "If my mom and I got divorced, and you only saw her on weekends, would that be okay with you?" "We barely see her anyway," Amber answered, looking at her food. Kyle nodded as he listened to his sister. He just watched as Amber came and sat on my lap. "I'd be okay with that, Dad," he finally said. "I filed divorce papers with Lisa this week. She signed them and moved into a condo near us at the end of the week. We helped her move into an apartment nearby. On the way home from school, the children could walk there if they wanted. Life went on for me and the children, only a little differently. Lisa did not fight for child custody or divorce. She had half the lottery winnings and half of our assets, including our old house, which I put on the market. I never wanted to sleep in that bedroom again, not after Erich Wise was there and had sex with her. We bought another house down the street. It was a new start for us. I saw Lisa occasionally at children's events from afar. She stayed away from me, and I stayed away from her too. Our only communication was about what we needed to know about the children and vice versa. Over time, the children told me that she started dating. I chuckled because she cheated for 5 years. I could not imagine that Lisa would remain faithful. As for why she started dating, it became obvious when I learned that Erich had been fired from BCE Systems and had returned to Europe to live off the family fortune since he was the only surviving son. His sister ran the show, leaving him time to pursue married women or whatever else he was doing. Lisa asked him to move to Europe with her, but apparently the thrill was gone. She went to visit him, and her apartment was vacated the day before her arrival. So that's it. Lisa moved on, and so did I. You may ask why I was gentle with her. Why didn't I sell her to African slave traders or something so she could work on the streets of Philadelphia? One reason, in her crazy way, Lisa sacrificed herself to save our daughter. Nothing more. Now about Katie. Kathy Sanchez, as she now used her last name again. I can't explain why, but this woman and I developed a strange but comfortable relationship. Neither of us mentioned exclusivity or commitment, but she finally moved in with us. She spent all her evenings with the children and me. Even with her mansion and all her rich friends, she chose us over them. I never asked her for this. It just happened. She and I just flew in from Montreal on her private jet. We spent the weekend while Lisa was with the kids. We said goodbye, kissing openly, as her limousine dropped me off. An hour later, the doorbell rang. I opened the door and saw Katie standing on the porch with 2 pieces of luggage. My friend's van was parked at the side of the road with 2 of her guards. "Dave," she asked, "can I stay with you guys for a few days?" 2 years later, she is still living with us. I can only say one thing: we are comfortable with each other. We are an unlikely and unmarried couple. All her life, she had never been without material things. But she never had one thing: the closeness of family. She had nannies and was sent to boarding school and then to college. Her parents loved her in their own way, but never gave her the time she needed. Their schedule was always filled with business meetings, parties, and trips. It's funny how everyone thinks Latino families focus a lot on the family aspect, not hers. So, at 40 years old, Katie Sanchez found what she was missing in her life. And I found a person with whom I felt comfortable. We didn't have a marriage to tie us together, but over time we found in each other that special person we most dream of but never find. I'll tell you how I know. It doesn't matter where Katie and I are. Whether it's on the beach, in a restaurant, on the couch, on a plane, or at a ball game, she wraps her arm around me and rests her head on my shoulder. I've heard this saying for a long time: where you find happiness, hold on to it. We ran into Erich in Paris a year ago. He was having lunch at the same restaurant as us with a dark-skinned woman with dyed blonde hair. He avoided my gaze, but Katie leaned over as we passed their table and spoke loud enough to be heard. "Hello." The look on his face, priceless. A week later, while we were in Rome, the news appeared about Fraser Erich von Wise. His BMW 8 Series convertible was found empty on the side of the road in Strasbourg. There were rumors that the woman he photographed in Paris was married to an angry Arab prince. Karma. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. 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 Click to the